Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reeder with Future Pastimes, and I am the designer of Firefly Misbehavin, which is a deck building card game set in the Firefly verse. And it's kind of an unusual deck builder in that it's really more of a deck optimizer, because you're not going to be building a large deck of cards over the course of the game, even though you're going to be adding cards to your deck, but you're going to be adding cards that won't stay in your deck for the whole game, and you're going to be taking cards out of your deck to build a tableau. So it's a tableau builder and a deck optimizer. Now, the way that you win the game in a standard win method, because there are alternate wins that you can get by playing with the episodes, but in the standard game, you're starting your turn with a requisite amount of power, and each card is going to have a power value from 0 to like 5, most of them in the 2 to 3 range. And depending on the player count, you're trying to start with a certain amount of power, like 12 power at the start of your turn. So the other players can see how much power is in your tableau. And in fact, once you have hit that threshold on your turn, you have to announce that you've done so. So they know at the end of a turn that you are at the win condition there, and you've got to get back to the start of your turn knowing that the other players are going to try to knock cards out of your tableau, either by nabbing them and adding them to their decks, or just dispatching them and knocking them out of the tableau into your recycle, which is your discard. So knowing that you have to deal with that everyone knows that you're about to win and they're going to try to stop you from winning, how do you win this game? So there are two basic approaches that I use when I'm playing Firefly Misbehavin. One is a posture about getting to that victory condition, and the other is more of a defensive posture, which is aimed at fending off the attacks. So let's talk about the first one first. And it all centers around activation. So you get one free activation on your turn, which you can use to play a card, or pick a fight, or use a card's ability. So having only one means that you're creeping up on that win condition. But there are ways to get other activations, and the most common of which is centered around those verse tokens that you can gain over the course of the game. And you can have up to 6 of them. Now, everybody's faction has the ability to spend verse tokens to gain additional activations. And for most of them, it's going to cost 2 verse tokens. For Eve's Down, it costs 3. So it's a little bit tougher for them. But if I'm playing Firefly Misbehavin, I am, by the approximate mid-game, when it looks like that one or more of the factions playing are around halfway to their power goal, I am working on trying to make sure that I've got a lot of verse tokens. And the reason for that is so that I've got the extra activations, and I can get to a point where I'm on a turn where I want to play more than one card to my tableau, especially if I've picked up some cards from the market that have a lot of power, 3, 4, or even 5 power. Those are cards that are going to catapult you to the win condition. And if it's got a lot of power, it probably has a high cost, which is also its defense. So it's easier to defend those cards. And I want to play them in rapid succession. So if I've got enough verse tokens for 2 or even better 3 activations, I'm going for the win. Boom, I'm going to play down 2 or 3 cards on the same turn. That takes me, if I'm trying to get to 12 power, takes me from like 8 or 9 power to 12, preferably over 12. If you can suddenly, I'm at 14 power or 15 power, then you can afford to lose 1 or 2 of your cards from your tableau, and you're still at the win condition. So that's the big thing, is that finding ways to get multiple activations. Now, there are some cards that have the ability to give you additional activations, especially some of the ones that have a lot of power have that ability. So that's another way that you could potentially get several of cards played at the same time. Now, unless you have a way to reset cards, the downside of having an ability is that it's probably going to need to be triggered, which means that when you replenish your hand at the end of your turn, you're going to be drawing fewer than 5 cards. And you want to have as full a hand as possible going into that win announcement so that you can defend those cards. So that brings me to the second thing that I'm doing is around the same time that I'm working on earning those verse tokens. I'm also looking at making sure that the cards that are left in my deck, which means they're not in the tableau, every card in my deck has the fight attribute. And that means that if somebody picks a fight with me to try to nab or dispatch cards from my tableau, I can defend them no matter what I'm drawing. So I usually get down to about 5 or 6 cards in my deck because everything else is either in the tableau or was a supply card that returned to the supply. So I know exactly what I'm drawing every turn, and it's all cards with fight, especially cards that have a good amount of fight. Like Jane Cobb has 3 fight, and River Tam has 3 power. They both have 3 power, which they can be used in a fight because they have the fight attribute. So those are great cards. They're also, because of their abilities and certain other components to their cards' abilities, they're not ideal to have in the tableau. With Jane, you have to spend a credit to keep him in the tableau, and for River, you have to actually discard influence to keep her under control in the tableau. So they're better just at being in the deck because then you draw them and boom, you've got 3 power in a fight. So I'm trying to make sure that everything that's left in my deck has a lot of fight, and I use the verse tokens to throw down a lot of activations at once. Now, to be fair, those verse tokens are so versatile, no pun intended, that it's good to have a couple of those if you can. If you can get up to 6, and maybe you spend 4 of them for the extra activations, but keep 2 because you want to be able to retain cards in a fight, especially if it's a 3 or 4 player game. So you're going to be playing cards with the fight attribute to your display area to defend your tableau. But at the end of a fight, those cards are going to go into your recycle, and you now have a smaller hand to deal with the next fight. But at the end of a fight, you can always spend verse tokens to retain cards. That means they go from your display area back into your hand, which means that they're ready for the next fight. So if you win a fight, you're going to gain a verse token anyway, which you can immediately spend to retain one of those cards. So hopefully you're able to retain cards. The Misbehave card is a great card because it has a lot of power in a fight, but once it's used, it's gone. So those are not necessarily ideal to have in your deck when you're going for the win. They're not bad in a 2-player game. They're great because you just use them and get rid of them, and then you don't have to worry about the player necessarily being able to pick another fight with you before the start of your next turn. It's possible. If they've got the verse tokens, they could spend 2 more for another activation, or 3 if they're eaves down, and then pick another fight with you. But again, you just have to gauge how things are going. How many verse tokens do the other players have? When you do that, I'm using 2 or 3 activations at once to throw down a lot of cards. So you do have to pay attention to what the other players are doing, what the state of their tableau is, how many verse tokens they have. All that's public information, and then get a sense for how many misbehaves or other cards with the fight attribute are out of the supply sets. So you can check that. You can be like, oh, there's 2 left, so 3 of them are missing. How many do I have? Well, if you don't have any, then you know kind of where they are. So that's the main thing, is you use multiple activations to leap into the win condition and hopefully past it. Keep in mind that if somebody does attack your tableau and they nab or dispatch an asset, that is for the top row of your tableau, you cannot be attacked again until after your next turn. So they're going to be trying to target stuff in your command area, which are the characters and items. So know that if they're going to attack you, can you afford to lose one of those characters? And maybe you just go ahead and let them nab them or dispatch them, because that power still isn't going to drop you below the threshold you need to win. So that's good to know. Most of your assets are going to have a higher power. That's why losing one of those is such a big deal, but why you also can't be attacked again. So keep that in mind. They're going to have to target that command area first and then go after your asset area, unless they can take out an asset with enough power that alone will get you to drop down. Just a counterpoint, If somebody else has used these tactics and they're going for the win, how do you stop them? Well, it depends on whether or not they have cards in their tableau that have the fight attribute. And if you can put down enough fight that it forces them to pull those cards out of their tableau into their display area to defend, then you've got, you may, even if you don't win that battle, you may have accomplished your mission of dropping them down below the threshold needed to win. So keep that in mind. You don't always have to target their best cards if they're forced to get rid of other cards with the fight attribute from their tableau. So that's the other reason why I prefer to keep those fight cards in my deck, and the cards that are in the tableau don't have the fight attributes necessarily when I'm going for the win, because I don't want to be tempted to use them. I want to rely on the strength of my current deck. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments about going for the win. This is a question that has come up before with people, especially when they're new to Firefly and trying to figure out the strengths and weaknesses of each of the factions and what kinds of cards help them to get to that win point. But these are tactics that will work for any of the factions, being able to sneak up on that win. You know, if you're trying to get to 12 and you're at 11, everybody knows, oh, one more card is probably going to do it. But when you're like, oh, I'm only at 9 or I'm only at 8, and suddenly you're up to 14, that's like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And then it may be too late for them to stop you at that point. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.